Hey there. Today I am going to speak a little bit about triangle squares. We use triangle squares so much as we're making different quilts, and I recently showed a quilt which has lots of triangle squares. And here it is. This is called Simple Elegance. This is just a section of it, but there are like 3 triangle squares in each block. So there are quite a few. If you make, this quilt is like 86 by 86. That's a lot of triangle squares to make. I usually, when I'm making a quilt block or when I'm writing a pattern, I only need 1 or 2 squares in a block. So I usually make them one way. But if you need to make a lot of them, I make them a different way. Here is a triangle square. A triangle square has 2 different fabrics, and it's on the diagonal in half. So that's a triangle square made from 2 triangles. When you are making just 1 or 2 or 3, you don't need to do a whole lot. But what I usually do is, I remember in my head, I cut the 2 fabrics that I'm going to have in the triangle square. I cut a square of each, and the rule to remember is you want the square to be 7/8 inch bigger than your finished square. So if I want these, I think, are cut to be finished at 2-inch half square triangles. And so I cut these, or I would cut these squares at 2 7/8. However, some of us that have done this for a while, 2 7/8 is pretty close to 3. I just go ahead and cut them at 3 inches, 2 3-inch squares. And 3-inch squares will give me a little bit extra so that I can trim them up. Then take a ruler or a pencil, or a ruler and a pencil. I just thought to make it show up, I would use a friction pen. We are going to put a ruler on the corner of the 2 squares. Oh, let me go back. Take your squares and put them right sides together with the I usually use the lighter one on top because I want to be able to see it. And then we draw a line from corner to corner. Usually I use a pencil, but well, I hope you can see this. Then take it to your sewing machine and just sew with your 1/4 inch foot on. You're going to sew 1/4 inch from the line on both sides. So now I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on the left side. And 1/4 inch on the right, on the other side. I don't know if you can see, maybe you can see the stitching right on the other side. Okay, and then you can take your rotary cutter, cut on the line, and press. I usually press them to the dark. You can press them open. I take them to my ironing board, usually, give them a good press, and then trim them to exactly 2.5 inches, because we want them to be 1/2 inch I'm going to trim them right here. Trimming on the dotted, my diagonal line. I'm going to trim there, on the top. Then I'm going to flip it around and go right here. Line up the 2.5, the 2.5, and again in the top. So there is the usual way that I make a, now this will finish it at 2 inches, but it's 2.5 so that we have seam allowance to put it in. Okay, and that's good if you just want a few half square triangles in your block. If you're doing a quilt that needs lots of half square triangles, then this is the other way you can do it. Like I did for this Simple Elegance. I put together 2 strips, put them right sides together, and then I'm going to cut off, this is the selvage, I'm going to cut that off of there, I don't want that. Now then, I'm going to lay this on my cutting board. Now, I have my strips, and these are both cut at 2.5 inches because I want these triangles to end up to be 2 inches finished or 2.5 inches unfinished. And then I use this is an Omnigrid ruler, very old one. I'm not sure if they're still in the same way, but it has a 3/8 inch line at the very tip of this corner. So I can line up this ruler so that it's on the edge that I cut off the selvage edge. The 2 line is right at the bottom of my strip. And I am going to just cut right there. I'm not going to do too much. I'm going to move this one out of the way, flip the ruler around, find the 2 inch, line that line up at the top so that 3/8 inch is up there, and cut again. As I have the strip right here, so I can just keep going right on down and cut 2 triangles together. And I could keep going until I ran out of fabric. But the trick on this technique is that we are going to take this right to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam right down here. They're together, they're right sides together, so I'm going to take them over and I will sew them, and hopefully they will be just right on the 2.5. On this technique, you have to have them sewn well. You can do a little, as you put the second one in, you might want to pick up your foot so that you can start it right where you want to begin. But you can just streamline those through there pretty fast. And if you have done a nice 1/4 inch seam, which you probably can't see, right there's on the red side, maybe you can see better. I am going to flip this over and press. And now we do have the little dog ear there, but it should be a nice 2.5 inch square. So it will, I can clip that little dog ear off, but it's ready to go. I don't have to do anything else. And if you have a whole 2 strips here, you can just make lots and lots and lots of triangles and have your quilt block or your quilt done really, really quick. So there are 2 ways to make triangle squares. The one where you just want 1 or 2, and you make your squares 1 inch bigger, cut on the diagonal, or draw the line on the diagonal and cut them apart. Or where you take 2 strips and put them right sides together and use the ruler to cut them at the right angle, and you can get a bunch at one time. Now there's some other ways too. There are other ways to make half square triangles, but I thought these 2 ways can get you covered in a lot of different situations.